PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to the 15-Minute Mediator podcast. My name is Nancy Gabriel, and I'm the owner of Mediation Around the Table. As a mediator, I help people in conflict come to their own resolution. I do this by facilitating conversations between the parties and asking questions that require them to actually listen to each other. Candidates for mediation are people who are more interested in coming up with solutions than they are in being right. If you think I might be of help to you in your situation, I encourage you to visit my website, mediationaroundthetable.com, and learn more about the services I've been providing to the Southern Nevada community since 2012. Thank you, and stay tuned for the podcast. Hello. I'd like to welcome you, and I'd like to welcome my guest, Miko Hargett. I met Miko many years ago at a networking event, and then I ultimately helped her with a custody situation, and we've become friends and have, hopped in and out of each other's lives ever since. Miko has an interesting journey, and we're going to talk today about self-care through big changes. So Miko, say hello and talk to me a little bit about how you define your journey, whether it was in parts or one giant leap.
Wow. Well, thank you, Nancy. Diving right in, I think it's a combination of both. Sometimes even a small leap feels like a pretty big leap, but I think there's that initial there was an initial realization to me, for me, where it was, towards the end of my marriage when we were having one of our final conversations, and I realized, like, wow, I need to understand myself better because my whole identity revolved around my relationship. And that was how I saw myself. And through those eyes, I saw the world. And so that was the initial moment where I realized I needed to take a look at my own self-care through a new lens.
And figuring out who you are. And I understand when you say you looked at yourself in your role as a wife and a mother. That was my situation too, because I lost my dad, my mom, and my husband in a 22-month period. And at that time, or right after that time, I thought, who am I? I'm no longer a daughter, and I'm no longer a wife. Who am I? And so tell me what steps you took to figure out who you are.
So that's a great question, because that was the question I had asked myself, well, how am I going to do that? If I'm looking at myself through other people's lenses, what does it look, how am I going to do that myself? So what I came up with was that my senses are mine. What I see visually, what I hear, those are personal to me. And so if I kind of based my awareness around my senses and how I made sense of the senses, then I would at least be coming from the most personal place that I could think of.
And real.
Right. It was, not what someone else was telling me. This is who you are. This is, how you're supposed to be, or this is, anything external. It was and it actually, even beyond the thoughts I was thinking about what I saw and what I felt, I realized that the things that made me laugh and the things that made me cry were things that were touching me so deeply, even beyond the linear thinking. And so I could kind of use that as a gauge of who I am, the things that give you the belly bumping laughs, or the things that just, are tear jerkers, those are very personal to you.
Sure.
Sure. And so that became kind of my ultimate baseline, what am I seeing and how does it make me feel, in an emotional way, but then even, all the steps leading up to crying or laughing.
Clearly comfortable with dealing with your emotions. Not everybody is.
I feel like I had to be, because I got to a point where I just couldn't. I almost felt like I couldn't trust my thoughts anymore. Like, whose thoughts are these? Are they, where am I getting them from? There's so much conflict, and so I felt like I had to go into the primal part where it was like just me, but it's it's a work in progress too, because sometimes the feelings are so overwhelming, but then I keep reminding myself, like, all we have is now. Like, time is a series of nows.
Yeah.
So how am I in this one moment?
Yeah, it's really true, because we're not promised anything. So, in the process of figuring out who you are, you came up with this concept of self-care and how self-care can be fun. Tell us how you got from point A to point B, if you don't mind. I know this is a personal journey for you and a personal question. So share what you're comfortable sharing.
So, so are you asking, like, how did I develop this concept of self-care?
Yes.
Or
and
for myself? Okay. So self-care, I realized part of understanding who I was going to be, how did I take care of myself? And it dawned on me that part of me seeing myself through other people's lenses was that I was developing self-care based on other people's self-care. And so, so it was kind of tricky there, because it's like, yes, I'm doing it for myself, but I'm not doing it for my own reasons necessarily. And so I thought, well, what am I gonna, what am I gonna keep doing? Because I have this little thing that I say to myself, like, easy and fun gets done.
Yeah.
And so I needed to make it something that I was gonna do.
Yeah.
And so after assessing, like, what have I done consistently over time, no matter what, I realized for me, writing was one of the things that is important to my self-care. Like, and writing from, like, from the depths, like, so stream of consciousness was something that a type of journaling that has been consistent with me, where it's easy, but it's not just, sometimes maybe it's like, oh, I don't feel like writing or something. But the fun part is that I kind of put on, and this doesn't require anything but your mind. I started to create the story and allow myself to just play with reality a little bit.
Okay. I'm going to circle back to that, but I wanted to ask you, when you started to say that you were, I'm sorry, I didn't jot down your exact words, but what I wanted to dovetail into is, in mediation, we talk about, especially in feedback, we talk about what worked, what went well, and what needed improvement. And I think that's the same sort of positive spin you're putting on your journey, is, what's working for you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Good. And so I want to, you were talking about creating this alternate world and all, and you mentioned something to me when you and I were preparing for this podcast. You're smiling, so you know what I'm going to ask you. I'm just going to let you talk about it.
About the fun part?
Yeah.
So, well, go ahead and ask me a question to get me started.
You used a term called Miko-opolis.
Okay.
That's what I want to ask you about. It just brought me such joy that you've created this world and you've named it. So tell us a little bit more about that.
So Miko-opolis is the name that I came up with for this sort of this alternate reality that I would use to frame my experiences. So, it just started with an idea that this is the place I go when I'm not comfortable with what's going on in the real world.
Okay.
It's sort of fantastical. For a long time, it was just a little like there was just a phone booth there, and we don't even have phone booths really anymore. So it was just kind of like, I don't know where this came from, but like, whatever, I'm going to go and make a call to my future self or whatever. And it was just sort of that like starting to look for the playfulness in life and look for the magical. Sometimes they say like you shouldn't get into magical thinking and stuff. I kind of reject that. Like I feel like the more magic we can bring into our lives and the more playfulness, the more life we actually have access to, like life source.
And who are they anyway?
Right. The royal they.
Yeah, who are they? So in this alternate universe that you've created, you also shared with me something that's super real to me. And that is, you talked about what's most effective in your mind is not survival of the fittest, but survival of the most collaborative. I love that. I wrote that down as a direct quote. Could you explain what you mean by survival of the collaborative, of the most collaborative?
Right. So, to me, the whole concept of survival of the fittest really pits people against each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like who's
Right.
stronger, who's going to win. And it's that polarity that I think we are suffering from, like, globally, where it's, this group versus that group, these beliefs versus those beliefs. But there seems to be throughout history, and, I'm in my own life specifically, there was a time of a lot of crisis, health crisis, relationship crisis, where I really felt super alone. And I could, I didn't feel like I was the fittest by any means.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened was I realized I can't do this alone. I have to reach out. Even though I feel at times like unworthy, depressed, anxious, like not my best self. I still have to make that effort out of love for myself and for those who care about me.
And strength, Miko, when you ask for help, when you're vulnerable, you're really showing your strength, not your weakness.
Thank you. I definitely didn't see it at that time, but it took strength, because I was just like, what do I say when I was like, okay, I just got to open my mouth and start talking, like, and trust that my intention is going to come through.
Yeah.
And so what happened is, over the period of the last decade, where it's just been active healing, people have shown up to help me, and they've contributed their resources, opened their homes, like shared parts of themselves that, like, I was just, I felt so much gratitude. And it's such a, it's a real gift that I was able to find that. And because I felt like I came to a point where I realized this cancer survivor journey, and even other aspects of when life really challenges you to the core, we need community then more than ever, but it's the hardest time to find community.
Absolutely. And so this brings me to my next question, which has to do with the theme of this podcast. And that is how you make self-care fun. You talked a little bit about your alternative universe, but what I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, is make some suggestions for what other people can do to make self-care fun.
I think it comes back to, like, what do you do for fun? Or what's the last thing that you remember doing for fun? And all the way back to, like, when you were a kid, what did you like to do for fun? For me, I like to spin stories in my head. Okay. And that's how that was fun for me. Okay. And, dancing was fun.
Good.
Cooking was fun. And then making jokes was fun. And I think just, it starts with that curiosity to find what's fun for you.
Yeah. I liked playing teacher. When I was a really little kid, we had a room in our basement with a chalkboard, and I had these squeaky shoes that squeaked on the basement floor, just like my kindergarten teacher's shoes squeaked. And that was fun for me. Now, I'm not sure how I can bring that playing teacher fun into self-care for myself, but I'm going to work on that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you could get a pointer stick and, like, just role play, like teaching yourself how to do something.
Okay. I could do a cooking show, right?
Yeah.
Myself. All right. That sounds like fun. That's a great suggestion for self-care. So listen, Miko, in the moment that we have left, can you tell the listeners how we can all be of help to you?
Well, the easiest way right now would be to go to follow my blog at mikohargett.com. I will warn you, it's raw. It's it's here and there. It's but it's the place where I'm going to start focusing all of my posts about the progress, things about Miko Care, Mikopolis, Miko Care Design, like the whole ecosystem you can find there.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being my guest.
My pleasure.
And if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm at mediationaroundthetable.com. And we'll see you next month on the 15-Minute Mediator podcast. Bye-bye.
Bye.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.